Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Rick Higgins is a software engineer turned nomad. He and his girlfriend sold their suburban house, moved into a renovated school bus, and hit the road. What did he find? He found himself. This is a conversation about finding your passion and having the courage to pursue it. As Rick says, what's the price of a dream? Ponder that as you hear his story of taking a road less traveled. Rick, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
My story is one of every man's story, every person's story. I am a nomad. To set the whole stage, I live in a converted school bus and I travel everywhere that I could possibly travel. And I realized that, back in the day, living down by the river in a van meant you were homeless. But today it's a viable alternative. It is a true way of life. And the way I got here is, a little disheartening, but I'm so glad it actually happened. A couple of years ago, I was doing the typical suburban existence, working and living for the pay wage and the weekend. And I had a burnout. A spectacular, massive, nervous breakdown burnout. I couldn't do it one more day. And so I turned to my girlfriend and I said, I got to quit my job. I have to just do something else and I gave myself 2 years. I'm like, I'll pre-retire for 2 years. I'll run off. I'll burn my wild oats and then I'll go back to work. And that's what we did. I quit my job within the month. We were gone traveling around the world. We got this school bus. And for the past almost 2 years, we've been living in it. We're down here in Baja California right now, just wandering and exploring. But one of the problems that happened was I gave myself 2 years. That was February. That was just a month ago. And I had to go back to work in my head. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to go back to that life. And so I started exploring what that meant. Yeah, it took me maybe 2 years to heal from that massive burnout. But what I've learned about myself and what I've learned about others has just been incredible. Now, to skip around time-wise a little bit, something happened recently that sort of solidified everything that I am doing. A good friend of mine died. Back in November, he was diagnosed with brain cancer, and just a couple weeks ago, he's no longer with us. And the night that I learned about it, I was scrolling through his Facebook, reading all of his stories, and somebody wrote on his wall, he only had 2 years left till retirement. And I know Dave. Dave was looking forward to retirement. He was the one that introduced us to this kind of life. And he's not going to get to do it. And so my girlfriend and I, Nikki, we just started talking. And did we make the right decision? Did we, by changing our lives from a typical American dream, selling the single family home and living in a 30-foot school bus, did we do the right thing? And it was absolutely yes. And I realized my life is not for everybody. Nobody, not everybody wants to live the way we do. But it got me to thinking that everyone does have a dream, and it may not be running down to the grocery store and paying the mortgage. And so for me, the idea of living this life for the rest of my life is appealing, and it's also necessary. I can't imagine now not doing this. You see a lot of, teenagers like, I'll take a gap year between college and life. Well, you can take a gap year in life at any age. We made a huge decision, and the people we have met, the places, the experiences, everything has just been incredible. And I realize it takes a bit of bravery. Living in a foreign country in a metal tube on wheels, it's It is interesting. It is a challenge, but to me, to us, the challenge is the life. And I guess that's my story. That's how I became a nomad. And that's why I want to stay a nomad, slow traveler, whatever you want to call it. Um, that's me.
I think life is about experiences, don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
And what you learn. I mean, you learn so much about the world around you and you learn about yourself.
That is very true. Like I say, when I had my burnout 2 years ago, I didn't even know who I was. I was so just fixated on the getting out of bed and trying to put one step in front of the other and just get through a normal work day, and which is actually kind of sad because I liked my job. My job was easy. I worked from home. I just, I did not have a bad existence, but the fact that I just couldn't do it anymore and I had to find something new. What I learned was just that, there are things inside of ourselves that we may not know about until we give ourselves the opportunity to discover them. I didn't know that I had this creative, nomadic, wandering guy. I thought I was the analytical spreadsheet person who had to plan everything. Uh, Now, I think I found myself, and I could not have done that without allowing myself the opportunity.
That's fascinating. I think we all have within us these experiences that we kind of bury, or these needs, these emotional needs that we bury. And we go on with the typical life. We do all the right things. And then at some point in life, for many of us, that our soul just, steps up and says, this is not your path. This is not what you're meant to do. This doesn't bring you joy. And I think we have to follow that path that brings us joy because we won't burn out there. We may change and evolve, but we burn out when we go against who we really are.
That is very true. And I think, for me, I'm 62 years old and I grew up in a certain society, a certain way where, especially men, were taught to be a certain thing, a certain way. I was raised to be a provider, a protector. I was raised to have a certain lifestyle because that's what everybody did. And it didn't fit. And I never really took the time to understand that. I lived the life, bought the house, had the kids, checked all the boxes, but it wasn't who I was. And I didn't even realize for the longest time that I could actually see if there was somebody else inside of me. And yeah, because it requires change and people are afraid of change. I'm afraid of change. Everyone hates change because change is scary. But on the other side of change, there can be some pretty dang wonderful things.
I think on the upside, change offers possibility and opportunity. And it also means you have to be present. You can't go on autopilot. You have to show up. And that's a little different than the way most of us live.
Oh, absolutely. Autopilot's easy. You wake up, you get into a routine and you go to bed. And, 2 weeks out of the year, you go on vacation. Um, and I guess some people do find comfort in that. I have a lot of friends who truly enjoy that routine, that kind of life, and more power to you. That means you found who you are. Um, but change and fear and allowing yourself to fail, in fact, expecting yourself to fail, can lead to some pretty great discoveries.
But what's failure?
Learning. I mean, to
Yeah.
me, I used to hate to fail because I'm so competitive and, oh my God, if you fail, you're going to fall down, you're going to get hurt. How will I ever recover? Now I actually almost try to fail sometimes. I plan on failing because it's an opportunity to learn what doesn't work, or actually sometimes an opportunity to figure out what does. Till you push all the stuff out of the side, which, shouldn't be there, you can't find the part that you really want to find. So, yeah, I'm kind of embracing failure these days. I think of it as a positive word.
Yeah, I think we're brought up with this linear idea, this dualistic idea of right, wrong, failure, success. Success is outside of us and material. And quote unquote failure might just actually lead to discovering some very interesting things. And depending on how you look at life, if life is about experiences and gaining wisdom, that linear failure success doesn't support that.
Ah, no, but I'm sure it serves somebody or something or some entity. Um, but as far as individuals, as far as self-service, no, I agree completely.
I admire the people who can just go on day to day. I was talking to my dentist. I only had a minute to talk to him. You know how the dentist situation is,
Yeah.
but I mentioned something about, I don't know, I was taking chances or whatever. He's like, no, he likes that day to day thing. He doesn't, under any circumstances, want that to change, and I'm grateful for that because he's providing a wonderful service. And if he were a little flaky, that service might not be there. But oh my gosh, I could never live that life.
I've actually get that still a few times. Now, where I am now, I'm sort of surrounded by like-minded people. Um, but I have a very good friend who is very much like that. He is a family man. He lives for his family. He lives for his hobby is bowling. He does things in a certain way, and it brings him a tremendous amount of joy. Now, he actually follows me on my YouTube channel. He follows all of our adventures, and he loves it. But he tells me every single time I could never do that. But he doesn't mean it in a negative way. And in
Yeah.
his case, when he says I could never do that, he means I enjoy watching you do it. I'm glad you're having a lot of fun and enjoyment, but it's not my path. And I have to respect that.
Yes.
He knows what brings him joy. He knows who he is. Um, and I think he's given himself the opportunity through looking at others and discovery and trying to figure things out. I think a lot of people may not do that. Many people may hide behind the routine just because maybe they're afraid of what's out there or they don't quite know how to do it. That first step is pretty damn scary.
What is the first step?
That's an interesting question. I mean, my first step occurred out of necessity, out of a medical catastrophe, if you will. But I think the first step is maybe allowing yourself to discover. I mean, some people may be afraid of what they will find, afraid of telling other people. You know, when I told my family, hey, we're going to go live in a bus and you won't see us for a year, there's a certain amount of guilt involved. I mean, my grandkids, my family, everybody is not here in Baja with me. And so I think people think of obligations, they think of responsibilities, they think of how their choices are going to impact others, and they simply go, it's just easier not to try. So I think maybe the first step is just allowing yourself to be put on the same priority list as everybody else, and to give yourself a chance, give yourself a week, a month, however long to figure out who you are and what you like. You might be surprised, and it may just be where you are already, but wouldn't it be good to know?
What have some of your best adventures been?
Oh, my Lord. We're actually still waiting for some really spectacular failures. Most of them down here in Baja have been great. Um, but I think the one that we're really into the nature. We kind of like just getting and seeing. About 3 weeks ago, we were down in La Paz and we went on a boat to go look for whale sharks. I just always wanted to see a whale shark. Well, we got in the water and we're snorkeling. And the second I put my head down, there's a whale shark about 6 inches away from me, coming right in, past under me. This behemoth is 30 feet long, and it actually whacked me with its tail. And I was just awestruck. I couldn't breathe. I'm just like, oh my God, this creature, this huge, magnificent creature is inches away from me. I wasn't going to see that going to the grocery store in Miami. So we try to find things like that. And it was an incredible moment being with that I keep saying it, that wonderful creature. It just took my breath away. And that is a lot. And in a couple of days, we're about to go pet some gray whales. It's just being out there in the nature and discovering things that aren't in your backyard. That has been our most wonderful experiences, have been things like that.
I'm with you. Nature's a huge teacher, isn't it? And there's something about nature. You both feel incredibly connected and you also feel incredibly small. I mean, it's just, for me at least, I find myself awestruck by the power, the beauty, the majesty, the endurance of the natural world.
Oh, absolutely. We were, well, actually, I was a little solo at this point, bringing the bus back across country. I'm from the East Coast. I'm used to East Coast mentality and views and nature. And I was coming back across through Utah, and I decided to park for a night in this place called Mexican Hat Rocks in the middle of nowhere. Where I parked the bus, there was nothing for 20 miles in any direction. And I remember just being awestruck. I mean, I've never seen a view like this. I have never heard quiet like this. I kind of climbed up near where Mexican Hat Rock was, and I looked around, and there's no humans, there's no planes, there's no sounds. It was an incredible experience, something you can't find in New York City or in Cleveland or somewhere. And it's those places where you're just like, how can this exist? I mean, it's wonderful. And those are the moments that we absolutely cherish. And the best ones are the ones that you didn't plan on. I kind of planned on stopping for the night and keep on driving. And all of a sudden I'm here in the middle of the only sounds I could hear are coyotes, which was a little scary to an East Coast guy, but I love those places.
Did you do any travel on the East Coast before you came out west?
I have previously. I used to do a lot of motorcycle trips up and down the coast, and we are heading back that way. We are actually leaving Baja in a couple weeks. Going to head up north to Oregon, Washington, shoot all the way to the East Coast and back down. So we're trying to see as much as we possibly can. Bus on the East Coast might be a little iffy, a little more room to spare out here.
I can remember my first cross-country trip. It was with my sailplane. You know, I had the sailplane in a big trailer and everything. And I was going across Route 80. And it was getting later in the day. And there was a sign for Truckee. And I'd read about these really long flights that people were doing out of Truckee. I knew nothing about anything. And this was before the internet. So, you know, travel was a little more adventurous, a little less informed. So I got off at the exit and I followed the signs over to the airport and I pulled in this long drive through pine trees. And there's a sign, a stop sign, but it says, whoa, not stop. So I whoa'd. And this wonderful old gentleman came out, Les Siebold. He's no longer with us. And he said, you're staying for dinner, aren't you? And I said, sure. He said, the bunkhouse is $4 a night. And it's another dollar for a hot shower. And I thought, oh, I found Nirvana. I can stay and fly for $4 a night. This is good. But the thing that struck me, going back to what you were talking about, was sitting outside the office that night. Les would feed the squirrels corn chips. It came up for corn chips. And we were having a few beers. And the sun went down. And we're up around, I don't know, the altitude's probably around 7,000 feet or so. And the sun goes down and instantly the chill comes into the air. There's no warmth left at that altitude. And it's so quiet. And the stars are so bright. It's as if you've almost entered this like magical world that you would never experience on the East Coast.
That is very true. We've discovered stars out here. Especially down here in Baja, there is so little light pollution. And yeah, the silence. And that's one thing I know a lot of people, they say, well, I'll travel around the United States and I'll see this. And the U.S. has so many incredible things, but the world to us offers a little bit more opportunity. So we're down here in a place where there are no people. So you can experience quiet, you can experience stars. But at the same time, we've traveled through populous areas and we've discovered I mean, it's just incredible nature and incredible people. I mean, that's the other thing. I guess we can talk about nature because there's lots of it, but it's the people that we also just love. I'll give you an example. I don't know, a couple of months ago, we were trying to find a place to stop down here. And we just pulled in front of a house because there's nothing else for miles around. And we just started talking to this family. They're like, yes, please park your bus in our front yard. I mean, they had literally nothing. They took us into their house, like, oh, you can use our toilet if you want. Here's how you pour a bucket in it to use it. They wanted to feed us. It was just the hospitality and the friendly. They wanted to learn from us. We wanted to learn from them. We had our Starlink up. So they were getting on their phones and then they calling their friends in from miles away to come get on their phones so they could watch movies. Meeting people like that, just serendipitously, just being able to talk to them and learn about their lives there have been so many of those moments. And I think maybe more than whale sharks and stars, that's the part that I truly enjoy about this. Not just meeting like-minded people who park next to us in their own van or school bus, but the people you would never, ever get to meet normally. That's probably the absolute best part of this life.
One of the things you say on your website is, what's the price of a dream? To me, a dream is priceless.
Absolutely. And I still don't know what I meant when I wrote that, to be honest. Maybe, you can look at it so many ways. Some people think that, I'm going to pay for a vacation in Cabo San Lucas, or I'm going to go to Europe, or I'm going to do whatever. And, your dream is something that you can afford. And maybe that's true. There are places you got to pay to go see. But is the price of acquiring something or seeing something or experiencing something, are you not doing it because you think it's going to cost too much, because you have to give up something? For us, we decided to drastically lower our lifestyle. Our monthly budget is virtually nothing. We pay for diesel and food, and that's about it. But some people don't want to give up their creature comforts. There's a price they would have to pay. And you're right. I guess when I wrote that, I'm positing that, is the dream worth more than your money? Is a dream worth more than what you may have to change in order to find it? And maybe there's happy ground where you can do both. I'll pick the dream every time.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you were saying that, it just occurred to me, is the price of giving up your dream, or having your dream for that matter, one of hanging on to your identity, which may be very materialistic?
Oh, that is very true. There's all kinds of identity. You're materialistic, what you've acquired, your status. If you travel abroad, am I going to lose my American identity by being in Spain? These are things that people don't give up very, very easily. But one of the interesting things that I've found, like wherever I've traveled outside of the U.S., no one has ever asked me what I do. No one's ever said, what do you do for a living? No one's ever compared their wealth against my wealth or their things against my things. They ask, where are you from? Who are you? What do you like? These are the things they want to know. And I know that the American culture is more of one that's more materialistic. One of the first things we ask when we use, small talk with someone, hey, what do you do for a living? That's not really what defines us. And maybe it does define some people, but that's, once you shed that, once you kind of get past, I am my bank account, that's a very liberating feeling. Strangely enough, it does feel good to stop thinking in terms of things.
It's a totally different approach to the world. I know I went through a period where I went from being very left-brained, linear, to transitioning to developing my right brain a lot more. And there was a time period where, man, my right brain was not getting it. And eventually, obviously, things found their balance. But I think that being having a right-brained approach to things, in addition to the linear ability to get things done, opens up a totally different world for those left-brained people out there, like me, like I was. It just is something I didn't even know existed. It was a different language, a different approach to things, and it is endlessly fascinating.
I've never really thought of it that way. Left brain, right brain. My story, starts way back when I was a teenager trying to figure out my life. I always thought it in terms of, functionality versus creativity. Back in the day, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to go into theater. I wanted to express my creative self, but of course, life doesn't pay for that. So I turned my right brain off, and I just functioned as a spreadsheet for the next couple of decades. When I decided to become a nomad, when I decided to become a YouTuber and try to regain that creative side, it was difficult. My right brain had atrophied. I don't think it knew how to work. It has been an interesting journey listening to the two sides actually argue. No, we must do this in order. Steps 1, 2, 3. It's like, oh no, I'll just screw it. Let's just jump to 4. And paint it purple. It has been an interesting journey, but I gotta say, I like one side much more than the other one.
So funny you should say that about arguing in your brain. I interviewed Jill Bolta Taylor, who did My Stroke of Insight on TED. She's a Harvard brain researcher who had a brain bleed, and it took her many, many years to come back from it. But as a result of her experiences, she wrote a terrific book. And in her book, she talks about 4 parts of the brain. And the very briefly, and I'm not doing her work justice at all, front left part of your brain is the linear part, the part that gets everything done, that is great with spreadsheets and everything else. Left rear part of your brain is the part that stores all your past memories to keep you safe. It doesn't want you to step out of your comfort zone, and it's your psychotic critic, okay? Right rear part of the brain is your 2-year-old who wants to paint everything purple. Right front part of the brain is your more spiritual, expansive, connected side, right? So one of the exercises she has people do, and I did this with something I was dealing with, she has your 2 rear parts of the brain, the history-oriented piece that wants to keep you safe, and the 2-year-old child who wants to paint everything purple. She has them talk to each other and find a way to reconcile their differences. And it's a fascinating exercise because it allows all your concerns and inhibitions to come to the front. And yet you have this very empathetic piece of you saying, I understand how you feel, but don't you want chocolate ice cream? Don't you want banana ice cream? Why do we have to have vanilla all the time? It's so interesting to see what your own brain comes up with. And I went through this with my book. I was terrified of asking for endorsements. I was just terrified. It was just rejection on steroids. So my historically oriented part of my brain said, rejection, 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 neon signs flashing, right? And the right part of the brain started talking her through it. In about 2 days, I was able to dispel that and move forward. It was really interesting. And I just mentioned that because I think that we both have these 2 parts of our brains that are there for very good reason. But maybe we should listen to the part that wants to paint the world purple a little bit more.
Absolutely. That's the one I've been paying a lot more attention to lately. And I think, and I'm not a brain specialist, but I do know that a lot of what we are taught, a lot of that, I guess, what keeps us protected is actually imprinted. All that stuff back there that's keeping us safe, all the rules of the road that we were taught, they're not going anywhere because our brains were gooey. They're all burned in there now. And that's the arguments that my head has right now is the one side is screaming, but this is the way it is. It must be this way because the imprinted part can't change. It knows what it knows, and maybe it's good. It keeps me safe. But that fun side, the 2-year-old side, can't quite understand, why can't you learn? Why can't you evaluate? So maybe we do need both, but I think if we listen to one side exclusively, and that could even be the child side, maybe that's not the best way of life. Maybe we absolutely do need two of them talking. It's just one of them needs to talk just a little bit louder than the other one.
What words of wisdom would you have for somebody contemplating making a great life change?
2 words: don't wait. Like I was talking about earlier, when I was sort of making sure that my life choices were indeed the ones that I wanted. When my friend died recently, he waited. The friend I was talking about that, enjoys his life as he is, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Now his life may be shortened. I have a lot of friends who just constantly tell me every time I talk to them, oh, I can't wait for retirement. I can't wait for this, because then life will be great. And I don't want to be a doomsayer. I don't want to be the guy who's like, hey, you're going to die. But don't wait. What happens if it doesn't happen? It's not a reward for a life of toil and trouble and struggle to get to where you want to be. We're entitled to find ourselves, to be happy, to do what we want. And don't wait. Find out what that is. Find out if it fits. Find out how you can do it. Because when you're going to stop waiting, sometimes it's all you do is wait.
If you could rewrite your story, would you?
Oh, absolutely. Unequivocally. And I get shocked expressions for all that. You mean you wouldn't go back and do this and do that and do this? Like, I would wipe the slate clean and start all over. I do want certain people in my lives. I do want certain events in my life. But I can also see myself going back and talking to 20-year-old Rick and going, here's all the stuff that you do not know and that you need to. But I can't. I don't have a time machine. So I tell that to myself now. I tell it to 62-year-old Rick. These are the things you need to remember. These are the things you need to focus on. And that's enjoying life, discovery, adventure, whatever you cliche buzzword you want to use it. For me, it's finding out what's out there. And most days, 9 days out of 10, it's a boring, existence, a different grocery store in a different town. But on that 10th day, because I'm putting myself in a place, I can discover something great. And so, I go back and tell myself to stop doing what I was doing for all of those decades and focus on what I can do in the future.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.